Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome... Oh, whoops, I forgot to... Okay, still recording? Sweet. Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from June 5th to the 11th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the US industry, identify top US MSOs that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. And we got this news mid-Wednesday after I published my video, but we love to hear it as Senate Banking Committee Chairman Sherrod Brown says his panel will vote on sending a bipartisan cannabis banking bill to the floor in the next 2 or 3 weeks, which is in line with our big end of June before July deadline in hopes that something can get done. And so this came as of June 7th at 11:04 a.m. Funny enough, less than 24 hours later, we get this at 10:36 a.m. on June 8th. So this was Thursday from Tom Angle. And if you're new to this space, this would not frustrate you nearly as much as it'll frustrate anyone that the Dems promised to, give an opportunity in this space if they voted for them, or anyone else that's been discriminated against in the industry. Because update, clearing up confusion caused by a pair of remarks from Senate Banking Committee Chairman Sherrod Brown on timing for a vote on a cannabis banking bill. Okay, are you going to be a bit more specific and give us a date? That would be great. His office tells Marijuana Moment that the committee will mark up SAFE soon. No, just very frustrating to see Tom use this language, knowing that it has been essentially just gaslighting and led to bullshit and virtue signaling for the last 2.5 years. You'd think this would piss Tom off by now. But so this article essentially covering what I just showed, but then what's worth sharing outside of that, the senator had previously told Bloomberg Law on Tuesday that the panel is looking at markup on the fentanyl issue, the executive compensation issue, and the Safe Banking Act issue, and we want to do all that in the next 2 or 3 weeks. In a subsequent interview with Politico on Wednesday, the chairman clarified that his panel will likely first vote on the 2 unrelated bills next week as he works to reach a deal on the cannabis legislation with Senator Tim Scott. Asked whether he could provide a specific timeline for a markup on the Safe Banking Act, he said no, and that it depends because this is all in motion regarding with Scott. After next week's votes on the unrelated bills, sometime in the near future will be Safe Banking. We hope, Brown. Well, it's not we hope, it's literally up to you, sir. So let's hope that you keep your word and don't continue to fail the industry as you had. And so a bit more here if you wanted to pause to read. But this is essentially the same story from MJBizDaily, so figured I would share it just to provide as many perspectives. Cannabis safe banking bill could be heard in the U.S. Senate within weeks. And so you can pause to read this bit here down to Safe Banking Act. It's a very short article, just so that you don't have to go pull the link in the description, and then you can pause to read the rest of this. But essentially sharing what we saw in that. So next 2 to 3 weeks is going to be a big deal. But do you believe anything that we're being told? Part of me does want to believe it because, again, if you don't solve the problem, America gets more dangerous. There's more cash on the streets, more reason to pass safe to get all that out, get them in the banking system. No doubt, so that they can collect taxes and treat them like any other industry. But again, 6 months after President Biden signed a landmark cannabis research bill into law, a growing number of critics say the federal government has registered 0 new cannabis research projects. It's not surprising, and it's very sad. It's pathetic. Based on all the virtue signaling this government does, they say they're going to do stuff, but they never actually act. And while all we can really do is remain optimistic, and while I know that's not easy after having been lied to for so long, I don't think any of us expect Biden to really do anything for cannabis. All eyes are on schmuck, and have we reached a tipping point? Because no doubt America needs the cash, and this industry would help the banks with their liquidity issues, no doubt. Why not also stop discriminating against the industry, normalize it, bring it in, and collect taxes like any other industry? That would be the American way. And then, of course, save lives by making sure that dispensaries are no longer targets for armed robbery. And so while this is the case, and we haven't seen anything from Biden, the good thing is that we're not relying on him to get this next incremental step done, and the support continues from other large organizations that have the lobbying power. So, for example, from Bloomberg Law, one of the articles mentioned bank executive pay, cannabis bills on tap in Senate before July. And so, as I've mentioned before, June is going to be a big month, and we're going to find out a lot more, near the end of the month. I just invite you to pause to read. Not going to go through this whole thing. But it's just a bit more detail on what Brown has said and what we can expect going forward. And so if that's not enough, of course, full link in the description if you wanted to read through it. Well, one of the stronger lobbies, the American Bankers Association, that has been for the Safe Banking Act in the last year or so, came out with this new article as of June 8th. Cannabis sellers are still using prohibited payment workarounds. And it's insane to think that the 500,000 in this industry that still can't open bank accounts, or they have a very difficult time having to operate in cash. Again, why try and make their lives way more dangerous? And so while we appreciate having the ABA on our side, helping trying to push a vote vote for the Safe Banking Act finally, putting up some money to offset what Big Pharma and other industries might be paying schmuck to delay. We'd rather have this than not, and even on top of the ABA that is going for SAFE. Amazon is back with something new as of June 8th. Amazon is supporting the effort to reform the nation's cannabis policy. And while that sounds good, and while we would much rather the States Reform Act get passed than the MORE Act, which they supported last year, just an update on our advocacy for equitable workplaces. We'd much rather hear workplaces that provide equal opportunity to everybody. Get that word equity out of your vocabulary sooner than later. And so you can pause to read this first bit if you're interested for whatever reason, but get this, let's scroll down a little bit. Now, pre-employment cannabis testing has disproportionately affected communities of color by stalling job placement and, by extension, economic growth. And we believe this inequitable treatment is unacceptable. What's funny is that right now, Amazon is technically performing equitable treatment because if equity is equal outcomes, it means none of their drivers can use cannabis and keep their jobs. So funny that right now they are using equitable treatment, and it seems like what they want to go for is inequitable treatment or no longer forcing everyone to not be able to use cannabis and keep their job because cannabis is so much more dangerous than alcohol and tobacco. Obviously not, right? But then get this, we remain committed to the safety of our employees and the general public. In addition to following all Department of Transportation regulations, our policy on zero tolerance for impairment while working has not changed. What's the fucking point of pushing for legalization when you're not going to be the leader and make the small changes in the short term that need to be made, right? Especially when Marijuana Moment shares, majority of truckers support cannabis legalization and testing reform amid labor shortage, industry report finds, because it's a waste of money if you're testing people that consume a joint after their workday and you're not testing people who consume copious amounts of alcohol or any other prescription drugs. It's nonsense. And so just funny that the timing for these to come out, because obviously if Amazon wanted to take charge, they would stop testing, but with an estimated 65,000 driver deficit in the country because of this waste of money testing for cannabis, the American Transportation Research Institute carried out an analysis of driver cannabis testing policies that also included revealing survey data from drivers who say that the status quo needs to be changed. Yeah, no shit. Especially because it affects all of us. Let's get the supply chains back on board. And so you can pause to read that snippet here. But some stats down here. A survey found that 72.4% of licensed drivers support loosening cannabis laws and testing policies. Another 66.5% said that cannabis should be federally legalized. Another question found that 65.4% believe that current cannabis testing procedures should be replaced with methods that measure active impairment. And that would be great if we could create a technology that did this. But from my understanding, many have tried and we still cannot find it. And that's what makes it even more complicated, that cannabis is very different than alcohol and nicotine. Far safer, obviously, although we don't treat it that way. And so there's more here if you wanted to pause to read. Of course, I'll bring you down a little bit more if you wanted to pause to read too. Otherwise, you can grab the full link in the description. And then they want to focus on active tests rather than urine-based screenings that only detect inactive metabolites. But that's the only ability or technology we have right now, right? And so the irony, just get rid of the testing overall and you'll save a ton of money and, get the supply chain back on track. And this is just another article sort of highlighting the same thing that I wanted to share, another perspective. Trucking industry losing drivers due to cannabis laws, ATRI study says. And so you can pause to read all this, a bit more down here, and then last bit you can pause to read. Otherwise, full link in the description if you want to go through that. And so we're going to jump over to sales quickly before we get back into some studies. New cannabis ventures as Michigan May cannabis sales stall, according to Alan Brockstein. He's such a bear. I'd say they're chugging along pretty strong given the circumstances, but at least we can look at this chart and note that it has followed in past years where we see typically a spike in legal sales in March and April as the spring comes around, and then we see it again in July as it's summertime and people are voting for legal cannabis with their dollars, and then we see it again in December before the holidays. But Michigan cannabis sales fell 0.1% in May from the shorter April to 245.9 million, still a considerable amount. On a per day basis, sales slipped 3.3%, but the growth of 31.9% from a year ago was up from 26.2% that was seen in April. And so medical sales falling 69.7% from a year ago to 7.1 million, down 10% sequentially, and so interesting to see that level fall so low, but cannabis itself is medicine, whether you get it through rec or medical. And adult use sales expanding 46.4% year over year to 238.9 million, up 0.3% sequentially. And so further breakdown here, sales by product type if you wanted to pause to read. But last bit worth noting, in May, the average price of $1,450 per pound rose again sequentially. That's what we love to see, gaining 3.3%, but falling 30.6% from a year ago. Michigan sales expanded 82% in 2021 to $1.79 billion and were up 27.9% in 2022 at $2.29 billion. And so far in 2023, sales have grown 38.4% compared to the first 5 months of 2022, and the program should continue to expand. And so Michigan, one of the markets doing things really right. A along with Missouri, despite being a competitive market and whereas there's a lot of competition and the prices have fallen because of that. But interestingly enough, wanted to share this from the Weed CFO in the 3-month period ending April, as pricing was down from 2022 in every segment of every market other than pre-rolls in Arizona and some capsules. And so for what it's worth, this source comes from Headset and Stifle Research. And so the top shows dollar sales percentage change and whether they're selling more overall. And of course, Michigan is leading the way. Good to see them latest month and then latest 3 months. Their numbers are standout. I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing something right, as we saw in the last bit here. And then looking down at the bottom, pricing percentage change. And so that is what's going down. Everyone has been affected, but when you have an abundance of illicit cannabis that can flood into the market and compete with the legal market because Congress won't do shit about it, or the federal government, right? That is sort of how we get here. But the good thing is that we've seen slow but surely price increases overall, which will hopefully help drive things up. But then also wanted to share this one. Good comment from Mr. Diesel down here. Well, I put together another one looking at wholesale brands. So I was hoping that Cresco was leading the way in every single one, but he adds very little consistency among top brands across different states. Now keep in mind, these are the 5 more mature Western markets that a lot of newer MSOs decided not to get into, plus Arizona, which is a newer West Coast market, and then 2 East Coast markets with Massachusetts and Michigan. And so as a Cresco shareholder, happy to see that they're at least leading the way in Massachusetts with their value brand high supply there, and we're not seeing them exit Mass like Trulieve is. And then Michigan, I imagine it's very competitive in that, unlimited license market. But with that, the top 10 U.S. wholesale brands down here, and again, this comes from Headset and Stifle Research. And so with that, looking at the Office of Medical Cannabis Use for this past week, number of dispensaries approved from the week of June 5th to the 9th. We've got one from the company Green Dragon in Inverness, Florida. Then the company INSA opened a dispensary in Jacksonville, Florida. And I apologize, I do not know the parent companies behind these 2 brands. But then Sunnyside, of course, backed by Cresco Labs, opened a new location in Destin. And so with that, qualified patient count this past week increased to 825,109, which represents a week-over-week increase of 2,291. So good to see that number back over the 2,000 mark. That's what we love to see. While dispensations for the past week, June 2nd to the 8th, we got all the MSOs in the state, all the active dispensaries, and the number of milligrams of THC sold this past week, number of milligrams of CBD sold this past week, and ounces in smokable flower sold. And of course, once we get the updated visuals from connoisseurs.io, I will put those in the comments because the graphs are no doubt easier on the eyes for some people. And with that, Congresswoman urges Biden to act on cannabis now as negotiations continue on banking bill. And so this is Rep. Barbara Lee. Not going to get into it because it's more talk and really little action. But of course, grab the link in the description if you want to read through it. I don't want this lingering because next year is an election year and you know what's going to happen then. Folks will be all over the place. And of course, nice for this Congresswoman to have empathy for fellow American people. But at this point, we're tired of that. We need action, Barbara. So come on, get schmuck to hold this vote sooner than later. And so with that, out of normal, happy to share many good studies. This one as of June 8th out of Canada. Fewer incidents between youth and police following cannabis legalization. And so just imagine the social justice impact. If cannabis is no longer illegal, and so cops in the U.S. have no reason to go after people for the cannabis plant, you would see a massive reduction in incidents, you'd think. And so you can pause to read, but main thing to highlight, they reported that legalization was associated with significant reductions in both male and female police-reported cannabis-related offenses for youth aged 12 to 17. And no doubt it would also reduce it overall if cannabis, again, was no longer illegal for adults also in the US. But then they estimated that these reductions have led to approximately 21,000 fewer criminal interactions between police and young people in the years following nationwide legalization. That's a big victory, I would consider. And so happy to share this one, full link in the description, but I don't think you need that. You can pause to read all of that. But of course, we got another one, adolescent cannabis use among youth in zip codes with medical dispensaries. So this is an older one that I found, but of course, I've shared others that are more recent that finds zero change or youth use goes down, and just figured I'd share what's at the bottom here. Conclusion discussion, cannabis use was significantly lower among 10th and 12th graders living in a ZCW in a zip code with medical cannabis dispensaries. Fascinating, right? Additional research should continue to monitor evolving state policies and whether they are associated with adolescent cannabis use, but no doubt states are leading this charge and the data doesn't lie. Lower youth use, lower opioid overdoses where medical dispensaries exist, all this points to descheduling and why we ought to have done it years ago, but hopefully we'll get there sooner than later. With that, from PubMed, another one from April 28th, 2023, so a month and a half old, but anti-tumor effects in cannabis sativa, bioactive compounds on colorectal carcinogenesis, which is fascinating in itself because while tumors can be benign, in many cases a tumor is an early onset sign that someone may be getting a cancer. But get this, recently considerable research has focused on the bioactive compounds of this plant, particularly cannabinoids and terpenes. And if that's not reason to deschedule enough, so we can figure out really what cannabinoids and terpenes are, how they affect the endocannabinoid system and whether they have a net positive or net negative. But simple enough, among other properties, these compounds exhibit anti-tumor, not pro-tumor growth, but tumor reduction effects in several cancer types, including colorectal cancer. And so how this has not been descheduled baffles my mind. And then when I Google, what is colorectal cancer? Is a disease in which cells in the colon or rectum grow out of control? I'm never going to stop smoking cannabis, I'll tell you that. No ifs, ands, or buts. And then with that, onto this one, evaluating the impact of cannabinoids on sleep, health, and pain in patient with chronic neuropathic pain, a systemic review and meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. So this is from April as well, 2023. Looking at 3,491 studies, 8 randomized controlled trials satisfied the inclusion criteria for this review. And what did they find? Of course, you can pause to read more of it, but cannabinoids have a role in treating chronic neuropathic pain, as evidenced by significant improvements in sleep quality, pain intensity, and PGIC. More research is needed, yada. Just gets annoying at this point, right? And so another one, impact of cannabis on income in patients following traumatic injury. I invite you to read the introduction to methods, but propensity matched analysis created 28,028 pairs. The analysis showed no significant difference in hospital mortality between cannabis positive and cannabis negative groups. Effectively, cannabis was not associated with overall in-hospital mortality or morbidity because no one to date has ever died from cannabis. Like, we know this. It is what it is. And so with that Medical Express clinical study, this is as of June 9th, 2023. Medical cannabis is a life-changing treatment. Get that? Not just a potentially effective treatment, but a life-changing treatment for people with Tourette syndrome. And for what it's worth, I have 2 older brothers, and my oldest one, when he was younger, about 10 years old, he was the only one that ever went to see a specialist and was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome. Now, my middle brother and I never felt the need to do this, but no doubt my oldest brother was definitely a consumer of cannabis, probably for that reason, without even realizing it. And if you can tell with the amount of energy I have, it's possible that I have some subconscious tics, but it never affected me that much. But no doubt my cannabis use probably helps me in the fact that I regulate it, I treat it as a tool, and this allows me to, potentially get some of this life-changing treatment without even realizing it. I don't know, but just wanted to share that for what it's worth, is the findings, which show a statistically and clinically significant reduction in motor and vocal tics in just 6 weeks, are published in the journal NEJM Evidence. And so I invite you to pause to read through it because I just don't want this video being too long, as we've got a lot in here. So again, you can pause to read, or you can grab the full link in the description. But with that last study from American Journal of Therapeutics, cannabis and cannabinoids for multiple sclerosis, from experimental models to clinical practice as of May and June 2023. So it's fairly new. You can read the background, areas of uncertainty, and data sources, but then just get this in the results. Evidence from preclinical studies showed that cannabinoids can limit the demyelination process, promote remyelination process, and have anti-inflammatory properties by reducing immune cell infiltration of the central nervous system in mice with experimental autoimmune encephalomyelitis. And so I get that they're testing in mice and they're finding these results, but we know cannabis has never killed a human. So can we just deschedule and have the balls to start testing this on humans so that we can actually get conclusive results and stop wasting so much fucking time and money? Moreover, it has been established that experimental autoimmune, that long word again, mice treated with cannabinoids experience a significant reduction of symptoms and slowing of the disease progression. Sounds promising. But given the complexity of human immune and nervous systems, cannabinoids did not have the anticipated effects on human subjects. And are you sure that's what was found? However, data obtained from clinical trials shows some beneficial results of cannabinoids as a single or as an add-on therapy in reducing the spasticity and pain related to MS. And sure, you can find whatever you like to reference this, but at what point are we just going to stop wasting time on mice, deschedule the plant, and study this plant that has never killed a human being on humans so we can find some conclusive fucking results? One day. And so with that, I figured I'd share this one from Benzinga. Former NFL star says he walks 35 miles a week thanks to cannabis. I could not do that when I was taking 8 pills a day. So big shout out to former NFL quarterback Charlie Batch for coming out and sharing his story. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Just invite you to read if you're interested. You can pause to read, of course. And then last bit down here, also you can pause to read. Otherwise, full link in the description. But with that, other stories to go through. Marijuana Moment shares as Connecticut lawmakers send cannabis industry tax relief and regulation bills to governor. So we love to see this. Hopefully getting the 280E tax removed for any MSOs in Connecticut. So you can pause to read for a bit more information here if you're interested. But main thing to consider is that Lamont applauded the legislature's passage of the overhaul bill and announced on Tuesday that he intends to sign it into law in the next few days. Well, I don't believe he has signed this yet. I will update you once we get news on that. But again, nice to see Connecticut get on board with Illinois, now New Jersey, Iowa, New York, PA, and Virginia, working for the legal industries in those states and helping them reduce the predatory taxes that they have to pay to the federal government because Congress won't do their damn job. And so with that, the New York Office of Cannabis Management, another laugh as we move through. Bad actors selling untested cannabis from unlicensed shops are undermining the New York cannabis market, full stop. And what's funny is that there are about 1,500 illicit shops. And so that's going to change today, though, because Kathy Hochul, OCM, and the tax department launch enforcement actions against 7 locations with more expected. So that means you other 1,493 illicit shops, you better be on the lookout because we're coming for you next week after we finish these 7 locations. It's going to take them years at this rate, right? So it's kind of funny. These are the locations they're going to go after. Read more if you want, but then funny, someone actually in the state that needs the help. Apparently you can report an incident, so I'll put that link in the description if you're from New York and you want to try and fuck with them a little bit, but hopefully you can fuck with them in the right direction while also helping hopefully the legal industry and not the illicit one. But with that, from Tom Angle, as Rhode Island courts have expunged more than 23,000 cannabis possession convictions as part of the first wave of record relief mandated by the state's cannabis legalization law. We love to see victories like this. 23,000 citizens in Rhode Island getting their lives back as they should. So full article in the description, of course, if you wanted to read it. Well, Nevada lawmakers send cannabis omnibus bill to governor that would increase possession limits and remove industry barriers. And so we love to see more mature markets taking more sensible steps to implementing policy that's going to help the industry, and that people would see like, oh, you're getting too cannabis friendly. No, it's just what happens when you try it. The sky doesn't fall. Then you try better things that is going to make it easier for everyone. The possession and purchase limit for cannabis would increase from 1 ounce to 2.5 ounces. Appreciate that as a consumer. And so, of course, full link in the description if you wanted to go through that. While Florida Supreme Court gives State Attorney General 2 more weeks to file briefs in cannabis legalization ballot challenge. Yeah, I imagine it's hard to come up with a case when most of your state wants legalization. And so that's why they need more time to come up with a case. How are they going to argue this? Multiple extensions of time for the same filings are discouraged. And so obviously not a good look if they try for this again. But all this to say, Joe Greisler, great call. Appears that they don't have a very good argument. They'll be grasping at straws. And I imagine that's because, yeah, most of Floridians want cannabis, and hopefully that's what they're going to get in 2024. And so with that, the last few stories before we head off, this one from Forbes. Now take it with a grain of salt, of course, because it's more projections, but figured I would share them. As things are looking up, the U.S. legal cannabis market sales expected to soar to $45 billion in 2027, says top researcher. And so, of course, their top researcher is BDSA, who we reference quite a bit, but again, take it with a grain of salt. But they think a big reason for the surge, despite recent setbacks, is the booming cannabis markets in states such as Missouri. That's essentially it. Obviously, New Jersey and New York have a long way, but you cannot say that New Jersey and New York are booming whatsoever. New York, booming for the illicit market, no doubt. New Jersey, definitely moving along a little bit faster than New York. And so with that, a bit more down here if you wanted to pause to read it. Otherwise, you can grab the full link in the description. But yeah, Missouri is going to be leading the way, no doubt. Maryland probably too. But then with that, East Coast, from Green Market Report, East Coast, Midwest markets expected to buoy sales growth in 2023. Essentially, an article covering the same data from BDSR. Just figured I would share it, written from someone else so that you can compare the perspectives. And so, yeah, you can pause to read it. But at least 3 new markets are expected to come online in the next 18 months. Of course, Maryland being one of the big ones. And then rest down here, you can pause to read. And then last bit from MJBizDaily, hemp given special status added to USDA Advisory Committee. And so nice to see a little bit of respect being given back to the industrial version of this plant, as the U.S. Department of Agriculture will include hemp in the title of one of its agricultural technical advisory committees, showing the agency recognizes the crop's important as a commodity. So I think this is a nice big step in the right direction, helping normalize and give credit to this plant for what it can actually do as opposed to what it's been demonized for in the past. As tobacco, cotton, peanuts, and hemp is the new name of the ATAC, according to a notice of intent from the USDA. And so it means that it hasn't been done yet, but they intend to change its name. So what do you think? Is this a step in the right direction? Are we going to see more respect given to the different types of plants, whether it's the industrial hemp plant or the medicinal cannabis plant that they deserve and that they've deserved for a very long time? We'd love that to be the case, but I do think we are, things are looking up for the industry. And just a reminder that June is a very big month. So from now until the end, I will be watching closely. I will be reporting. But based on all the facts and the momentum, what do you think? Are we getting closer to something? But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What do you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.